It's time for the Hockey Writers Grindline, a weekly show covering everything Detroit Red Wings. Brought to you by our own iconic top line of Wings writers. Sit back and enjoy The Grind.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of The Grind Line here at the Hockey Writers. I'm your host, Matthew Zator, and as always, I am joined in by my defense partner, Devin Little. Devin, how's it going? Season is coming. We're about a week and a bit away from Traverse City. We can start talking about prospect tournament. There's a bunch of tournaments going on all over the NHL. We got players kind of rolling in, skating, informal skates or whatever. So it's coming. We are almost there.
Yeah. In the article I released today, I talked about how, grocery stores are starting to stock their apple cider. The air is starting to get a little bit cooler. We have football. Just this on Thursday night, the Lions kicked it off. And now exactly what comes next after all of that? Training camp. And we are counting down the days. We're like less than 2 weeks away, and that's exciting stuff, especially on this show.
Yes, we've been grinding through, as our show is titled Grind Line. We keep grinding throughout the off season. We're going to do our last Atlantic Division preview today. We also got a few other player previews, but until we get to that, let's do our one good, one bad. As always, we do on this show. Devin, a good and a bad from this past week.
My one good is actually going to be one of our longtime viewers here, Lord Venom. Hey, how's it going? Over on our Discord channel, that shout out to that. Let me know that he's actually going to the Blackhawks Red Wings game on February 25th, and that was recently announced that that's going to be the night that the Blackhawks retire Chris Chelios as number 7. So shout out to you, Lord Venom. That's gonna be a real fun thing for you to go to. Hopefully when that comes around, you'll have a nice comment to leave and tell us about how that went. Super jealous. And then my one bad, well, I have 2 bads. One bad is that I'm not going to that. And then also like a little, Chelios had a long, definitely is deserving to be retired by the Blackhawks, but if you grew up around my time, he's a Red Wing. Which is funny because older people would tell you he's a Canadian, but I digress. But no, my other bad is actually going to be those Patrick Kane rumors that we thought was just going to be a fun like comment corner thing a month ago, and now it's like a legitimate rumor that like Patrick Kane might be going to the Red Wings. And I don't say it's a bad because like, no, not Patrick Kane. Don't come here. It's more of I'm already upset that the kids don't really have a shot at making the team. You bring Patrick Kane in, they have 0 chance. They at least have like a slim chance of making the roster right now. You bring in Patrick Kane, there's just no chance. And as someone who loves writing about kids, I want to freaking let them have an opportunity. So let's not bring in Patrick Kane, okay?
Yes. Add another veteran that'll take top 6, whatever. It'll take minutes away from everyone else. Any of the prospects that could make the team will have pretty much zero chance of making the team then. So even though he would add, but
Patrick Kane would be a great veteran to have around the kids if the kids were on the team.
Yes. He's not a mentor to anybody that'll play it.
Dylan Larkin doesn't need a mentor. We're good.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that one. All right. Well, my good is we talked about the PWHL last episode. Well, they signed their first 3 players. The Ottawa franchise signed Emily Clark, Brianne Jenner, and Emerance Mashmeyer. All signed with them, first signings in the league. So that's a milestone. That's great to see. There'll be a lot more players signed, obviously. But those are 3 massive signings for Ottawa to have first. They're all stars on Team Canada. They all been stars. So it's all Olympians as well. So that's a pretty big get for that team, right? So that's a good for me. excited to see that league get off the ground and we can start watching these some great hockey alongside the men's as well. So that's going to be fun. And my bad is that we are still far away, relatively. We're still about a month still away from actual regular season hockey. We do have preseason coming up in like a couple weeks, but that's preseason. We don't really. It's fun to watch, but it's sloppy hockey. It's not really fun. Regular season is when we get to the real stuff. So that's a bad because we're still a ways away from it. So otherwise, I don't really have anything else that's bad. It's been pretty good for a lot of things in the off season, mostly. So, all right. Well, let's get into our last Atlantic preview. The Montreal Canadiens at the end last of the division. They did finish last in the division as well. I think that's what we've been doing throughout this thing. We've gone from the top to the bottom. So the Montreal Canadiens, a very young team, a lot of great young players, young talent, and it's reflected in their roster. I mean, go down the lineup, even their captain, Nick Suzuki, is relatively young. He's only 24 years old. And we'll start there at the center ice position with those guys. You got Nick Suzuki, Kirby Dach, who's hasn't been really used at center too much in his career. He has been used in Chicago. He was used kind of a bit in Montreal. He is listed as a center on the depth chart at Cap Friendly, so we'll include him here. Alex Newhook, Jake Evans, a lot of these guys. We got so many guys. Sean Monahan's in that mix as well. So, Devin, what do you think about the quality between the Canadiens and the Red Wings down the middle?
Honestly, I think it's pretty close. I like Suzuki and Larkin as like a pretty good even matchup. I think, Larkin's proven himself a bit more just because he's older. He's been in the league longer. But that also means that Suzuki still has some upside that maybe we haven't seen because he's younger, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're both captains. They're both like in that category where you could argue that they're not top line centers, even though they are. But yeah, so I take your pick. I think that at least as far as this season is concerned, you pick Larkin, and it's because of his supporting cast. Which I think that kind of gives you an answer for the next part of this deep dive into the Canadiens. But at the top, I go Larkin just barely. And then as you get down it, I think it's pretty similar. You've got your two-way guys that can kind of play around the lineup and chip in on offense, contribute on defense. Christian Dvorak can do that. Alex Newhook has potential. He could take some steps as a centerman. Same thing with Kirby Dach. Basically, their group kind of is similar to the Red Wings group, but the Canadiens group is younger and therefore has more upside and maybe has just kind of like the mystery box appeal to them, right? Like we know what we're gonna get out of Andrew Copp this year. We know what we're gonna get out of JT Compher. We know what we're gonna get out of Dylan Larkin. And that's great, but there's just that intrigue with the Montreal group where it's like, we know what they've done, but we also they could do more. They're still developing. Pretty even, honestly, in my book, just to kind of round this out. I think it's even. I think that if you're somebody who likes experience, you definitely got to go Red Wings. If you're looking for results this year, and we're only looking at it in terms of this year, it's probably the Red Wings. If you're looking long term, if you like upside, if you're you want to kind of veer towards youth, then I think you might pick the Canadiens on this one. Just kind of pick your poison when it comes to the center group.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting, lots of potential, like you said, with the Canadiens group, and a lot of guys that are not proven centermen, like Newhook, Dach. They're not proven to be consistent NHL centers. Like Dach has a lot of trouble in faceoffs, and that's always a thing for young centermen. They always have to kind of figure that out as time goes on, and that was his thing. And puck possession's huge in this league. So if you don't win the faceoff, you're always chasing the game. And I think that's something you need to develop. But yeah, I think so. I agree. I think they're pretty even, and maybe the Red Wings would have a little bit of a leg up this season because they got a bit more experience down the middle. But I mean, in general, I think both these groups, and they're part of that changing of the guard. I mean, you got the Canadiens and the Red Wings are going to be part of that new wave of teams, kind of replacing the veteran lineups of the Lightning, the Rangers. I guess, I mean, the Rangers have a lot more veterans too. Not the Rangers. Who am I thinking of? The Maple Leafs. The Maple Leafs are going to be going down too. I mean, all these teams are going to be kind of trying to switch from veterans to young guys. And I think they're going to have a harder time because they don't have a lot of guys coming up behind them. All right, let's go to the wings. And you got two short guys on these. You got Cole Caufield and the Canadiens. You got Alex DeBrincat. DeBrincat's an inch taller than Caufield listed. But they're too young. DeBrincat's older, quite a bit older, but they're two guys that have overcome their size by being dynamic and fast and super skilled. So they're the headliners, I think, on this on the wings. And we talked about guys like Newhook could have been playing the wing as well, but you got Brendan Gallagher in there still. You got some other guys like Pezzetta, Slavkovsky in there. What do you think? Oh, Josh Anderson as well, another veteran. What do you think about the wingers compared to the Red Wings here?
I would love to look into a crystal ball and see how Slavkovsky is going to do this year, because I think that will have a big impact on what this conversation is like, as we look into the season. But as is, I do like that you kind of, made the DeBrincat Caufield comparison. They're both like scorers, both small scorers. Caufield has all the potential in the world, has really looked great under Martin St. Louis. And then DeBrincat, we know what he's done in Chicago. We know he had kind of a down year in Ottawa. And the question is just, are the Red Wings getting Chicago DeBrincat or are they getting Ottawa DeBrincat? Either way, it's a good player. It's just kind of, how good of one is he? Both Caufield and DeBrincat are capable of scoring 40 goals this season. And that's huge for both teams. And, like you said, Caufield's younger. It's not like DeBrincat's old. He's 20, yeah, not to put words in your mouth because you didn't say that. But they both are going to be capable of scoring 40 goals for a long time is what I'm getting there. So you can kind of maybe say that's a wash, with maybe veering towards Caufield because he's younger if you want to do that. But then you get down the supporting cast, and as has been the case with a lot of these teams, I like the Red Wings depth. And I think that's kind of by design, at least in Yzerman's mind. Because, don't get me wrong, Montreal has some pretty good guys. Even if you are flexing a Kirby Dach or an Alex Newhook to the wing, both really good. Brendan Gallagher's been a really solid Brad Marchand type of player in his time in Montreal. He kind of gets overlooked because Montreal is just kind of peaks and valleys. Josh Anderson can definitely bring some physicality. And that brings me to Slavkovsky too. He's kind of like an X factor here. He was first overall a year ago, first pick of the draft. And you don't usually, when you make that pick, you're expecting that guy to be a huge part of your team, as soon as possible. So, if he didn't quite have the year anybody expected him to have last year, if he starts to look a bit more like a first overall pick this year, look out. That's going to be kind of an equalizer for Montreal in this discussion. But as things are, we talk about the Canadiens, they have this upside. They could be really good. But for the Red Wings, it's most of their wingers are veterans.
Yeah.
Outside of Berggren and Raymond, really. So we know what they are. We know they're good. We know that they're, it's, you go down the lineup and even guys on your third and fourth line, you can expect some quality minutes from. So, I guess that's my answer here. I like the Red Wings depth once again on the wings. And then as you get at the top of the lineup, um, I would say things are more or less equal. DeBrincat, Caufield, even some of their other guys. And I think it just kind of comes down to if Slavkovsky makes a huge jump, and also if Lucas Raymond can make a
Mhm.
big jump. Let's not write him off either. Um, because as is Raymond's a good player, but if he takes a jump or takes a big step like we're
Mhm.
hoping, it doesn't really matter how big of a step Slavkovsky takes because Raymond's already a quality player and he could become an elite player if he takes a step.
Mhm. Yeah, and like Raymond had obviously a heck of a rookie season, and a little bit of a down sophomore. Not horrible, but not crazy good either. So I mean, you got if Slavkovsky can take a jump as well. Yeah, he could be an interesting one because he did have a really good season. It's just he got hurt, and then
Yep.
that kind of derailed everything. And that's we'll see what happens with him. I think they do have a lot of again the potential of being really good with a lot of their wingers. Um, and you know, it's funny, you get Gallagher, another short guy in there as well, 5'9". But yeah, they're he's not obviously not the player he was earlier on. He's dealt with injuries as well, and he's up there in age now. 31, not really old, but he's dealt with a lot of injuries lately and hasn't been able to play full seasons for a while. So hopefully he can get back to that. And I mean, I think overall, yeah, I do agree. I think the Red Wings do have a bit more depth, but again, if the Canadiens, some of their guys hit, they could have that depth as well. Slavkovsky playing in the bottom six. I mean, that's what it looks like at this point. He could be playing in the bottom six. And that'd be pretty good for a team that is still rebuilding. I mean, they're definitely going to be in that lower end of the division again. So we'll see how this all kind of plays out in forward group. All right, defense. Now, the defense again on both sides. I think the Canadiens obviously are much younger. They got a lot more younger defensemen. Red Wings a lot more veteran guys, especially this season. That may change next season or even the seasons after that because they got a lot of young defensemen coming up. Could turn into what the Montreal Canadiens are right now. What do you think about this defense? I mean, they are headlined by, I mean, I don't even know who they're really headlined by. I'd say maybe Caden Gooley as being their biggest one. Arbor Xhekaj had a great season in his rookie season as well. Kind of came out of nowhere, really. You got other guys with potential, Jordan Harris, but they're two veterans, David Savard, Michael Matheson. They're maybe headlining the veteran group, but I'd say the young guys Gooley is. So what do you think about this defense?
Yeah, I think that's kind of the biggest thing here is like you look at the group and it's like they're headlined by, oh geez, who are they headlined by? I don't know. They've got some guys, but I don't know if they have a headliner. One, say what you will about the Red Wings defensive group, but they definitely have a headliner.
Yeah.
His name is Moritz Seider, in case you weren't sure. Um, and even, outside of Seider, you've got Jake Wallman, who looked like he could be a headliner
Yeah.
in his own right too, at least next to Seider. And then you get down the lineup, and you know you have competent veterans, not like anybody who's gonna. I don't know if anyone's gonna move the needle. Maybe Gosh Despair can move the needle a little bit. Um, Petrie could be a needle mover in the right role in the right situation. But like no one out of that group outside of Seider or Wallman's really gonna like excite you.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess that's kind of where this conversation comes down to. I do think the Red Wings group is better, and it's literally because they have a headliner, um, and somebody to complement that headliner. But if we're talking about the whole picture here, um, let's give Montreal's group their due. Savard and Matheson are both perfectly capable NHL defenders. Um, are not dissimilar to some of the guys on the Red Wings group. You know,
Mhm.
I could I could reasonably compare a Savard to like a Sherratt, honestly. Um, Similar types of players.
Mhm.
They have a familiar face in Gustav Lindstrom, um, who at this point we all know what he's about. He's like prototypical seventh defenseman
Yeah.
who, if he can take a step, would be a really solid sixth or bottom pairing defender. That's kind of what we were hoping he was going to be in Detroit, but he'll have that opportunity to be that guy in Montreal. And then Gooley, as you mentioned, as kind of their headliner, he's definitely at least out of the guys that are projected to be on the roster this year, he definitely has the highest potential, highest ceiling, I think.
Mhm.
Be interesting to see what happens with David Reinbacher over the course of the year. Their
Yeah.
top pick in this most recent draft. He certainly has the goods to be a top pairing defenseman himself, but we don't know if he's going to play in that league this year, and we also don't know if he'll be that right out of the gates like Zator was.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of talent in Montreal's group. I do think it's kind of a in a similar way that the Red Wings forward group is kind of like a by committee approach. The Canadiens defense is kind of a by committee
Yeah.
approach with like a couple of guys that stand out. Um, Whereas the Red Wings group is the outside of the top pairing, it's kind of by committee, but the top pairing has headliners, and I think that's the difference maker in this conversation.
Yeah, I do agree. I think Sider is the one that tips the scales for me. I mean, he's an established NHL top pairing defenseman and not an old one. He's very young and he's got a lot more to give and a lot more potential. I mean, we don't know, like you said, with Reinbacher, how he's going to pan out. And same with Gooley. I mean, he's only 21. So it looked really good last season, but we'll see how he kind of goes over the course of his career, which seems to be going to be a long one. So, yeah, well, again, the potential is big with their defense. So we'll see how it all kind of goes as they develop and how they compare once the Red Wings young defensemen kind of get established as well, like Edvinsson, Johansson, Axelson and Pelika. I mean, they got so many good defensemen coming. They could really be really good and be the talk of this whole division in the future, right? So, all right, the goaltending. Now, this one is interesting because they have a starter, Samuel Montembeault. I don't know if he's an established starter in any other team. I mean, he had a really good season last season. 26 years old. He's probably really kind of entering his prime years as a goaltender. But they also got veteran Jake Allen as well. I think, to me, I think they're really comparable to what the Red Wings are because Ville Husso is probably better than Montembeault, but they're around the same age, I believe. He's like 27, right? Husso?
Yep.
So they're on that same age. I think Husso has a bit more track record in the NHL, maybe. But what do you think about this goaltending?
I more or less agree. We're even down to like the fact that we mentioned Jake Allen and Montembeault. There's also Casey DeSmith
Yeah.
that is a factor there somewhere. So they've got like three guys. Point being is that they have three guys that have played in the NHL, have proven that they can at least like deliver quality results semi-consistently.
Yeah.
So like, you kind of assume that like Jake Allen's probably going to be one of the guys in Montreal. He's getting paid to be one of the guys. And then it's, you let DeSmith and Montembeault just kind of decide who's going to be that backup or who's going to be the second guy. I know who I would pick, but that's for Montreal and for their writers to talk about. And then, what have we been talking about? The Red Wings have almost the exact same situation. They have their guy that you know is going to be there, Ville Husso, and then two guys that you expect to just battle it out for the backup spot. One of them being like a veteran who is in his 30s, James Reimer, Casey DeSmith.
Yeah.
And then another guy who's not as old. Lyon's older than Montembeault. Lyon's 30 and Montembeault's 26. The point being is their NHL track record isn't as deep, isn't as established, I guess. So then maybe you go, maybe that's the guy you stashed in the AHL. I don't know if that's the way Montreal's gonna go, but again, point being is that there's three guys, only two of them are gonna get spots. Their AHL team in Laval is gonna have a really good starter, regardless of who it is. And you'd say the same thing about the Griffins this year with Lyon or Reimer, likely Lyon.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could maybe call this a tie, maybe slight edge Detroit, just because of what Husso did last year. And he's also younger than Jake Allen. So
Yeah.
like in theory, you could see more from Husso, especially after now that he's coming into a season knowing what it means to be a starter. Um, I don't know. Jake Allen is honestly, in my opinion, one of the more underrated goalies in the NHL, and it's because of where he plays right now. Um, he's more than capable of stealing games for his team. He kind of just is one of those second tier starters, second tier goaltenders that like he's not an elite guy. He's not going to be a 60 goal guy. He's best in a tandem. But man, he's good when he's on.
Mhm.
And at least from what we saw in his first season in Detroit, that sounds like Husso, right? Probably best in the tandem, but when he's on, he is on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I again really close. I could probably say it's a tie, but I'll give a slight edge to Detroit because this is a Red Wings show and I can.
Yeah. Husso's 28. I was close. I was almost right on. Yeah, it's I think I agree. I already said my thoughts before, but yeah, I think it's more that Montembeault, and I don't know. The goaltending is interesting in Montreal. I don't know how they're gonna do. I don't even know why they got to Smith, in my opinion, but
Yeah.
they're gonna have to trade one of these guys away. I don't know if any of them are gonna. I mean, they're not gonna try to get Allen down to the minors. I don't think. So I mean, one of these guys is gonna be waived, and I'm sure a team will pick up one of them. I mean, depending on, I guess, what training camp comes out as, but we'll see. All right, well, there's our last preview for the division, and overall, I think the Red Wings match up pretty well with the lower teams. Like, it looks like that's where we were going. The higher teams, they were kind of fell behind, quite a few of them. But they're getting there with their young talent. It's like I say, that changing of the guard's coming. Those veteran teams are going to start flipping with these young teams, and I'm here for it. We got to have that happen soon. Okay, well, before we get to our next player previews, here is a message from the Hockey Writers.
Interested in writing for the Hockey Writers? If you have experience writing about hockey, are passionate about the sport, and are looking to take your writing to the next level, the Hockey Writers could be the place for you. Here at THW, you will have the opportunity to hone your craft at one of the world's largest and most respected hockey publishers. You will have control over what you write, be able to seek out media credentials, and be supported by a large network of writers and editors. Plus, you'll get paid for doing it. If you're interested and want to know more about team openings and requirements, please visit the Write for THW page on the Hockey Writers website. A link to that page is also listed in the description.
All right. Well, as I alluded to, let's talk about another two players from our Red Wings team here, and we'll start with Andrew Copp. And he's new. He was a new addition last season. Relatively good season. Didn't score a lot. He only had 9 goals, 33 assists, a lot of assists. So 42 points in his first season with Detroit. Was a career high. Because his Winnipeg actually wasn't a career high. I'm not totaling his last season. But second career high, because between the Jets and the Rangers, that was his career high season. But what do you think? What are your expectations for Copp in his second season with the Red Wings?
Well, I think first and foremost, the Copp gets kind of a bad rep around some fans. Because he got signed to that big money deal last year, 5 years, almost $6 million, to be the second line center. And he puts up 9 goals and 42 points. And those are not second line center numbers. But let's remember that he missed all of training camp because of a core muscle injury or surgery. There's a surgery, it's in his core. I forget all the details. I know those. I know that much. So he missed all of training camp, and then he is in the lineup on night 1, and so he basically spends the first couple of weeks just figuring out his teammates and catching up, and he's literally playing catch up basically the first couple of weeks, and you know, training camp is huge every year, but it's especially huge when you're joining a new team. Because you got to get used to the systems. You got to get used, that's when you start to establish chemistry with your teammates, and finding your fit in the lineup. And Copp didn't have that opportunity. And he still managed to put up 42 points.
Yeah.
So honestly, if you kind of like add in the context that like that first month is kind of a wash because he was still getting used to his he's getting up to game speed basically.
Mhm.
It's a pretty good season. It's basically at that point like 40 points in 70 games, which is still not like, I'm not going to pretend that's like great, but it's a lot better than what his stat line looks like. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, so I think that, first of all, if you're like really down on Copp, I would try to realign your sights here and kind of um remember what was going on and why he didn't get off to the start he wanted to get
Mhm.
into. And so with that in mind, he's going to be at training camp this year. He has a year with the Red Wings now. He knows what to expect. He knows his teammates, outside of the new faces, obviously.
Mhm.
And even one of the new faces, the biggest new face, arguably, JT Compher, they were teammates at the University of Michigan. So there's like at least some familiarity at that level.
Mhm.
I expect Copp to honestly have a better season than he had last year. I'd like to see him crack 50 points. And I think he's perfectly capable of it too, because he's familiar with his teammates now, because he should be like in a steady middle six role throughout the year. I think I don't know if he's going to start as the 2C, but I do think he'll line up as the 2C at least, throughout the season. There would be
Mhm.
kind of a rotating door there. Um, and he's still going to be a guy that kind of features on all the special team units. He'll be on the penalty kill, probably be on the second power play. Um, and he'll be plugging into roles throughout the lineup depending on what the injury situation looks
Mhm.
like. Let's not forget too that one game that Marco Casper played last year, Casper's line mates were Lucas Raymond and Andrew Copp.
Mhm.
I could see that line being a thing too if
Oh yeah.
Casper makes his way to Detroit. Um, one final thought here too: Copp wore an A with the Red Wings this past season. He was part of that rotating group. I expect he'll still have that A this year. Um, so not only will he be a bigger piece of the puzzle on the ice, I'm sure he will continue to be a pretty big piece of the puzzle in the locker room. And that's part of the reason why they gave him that big money deal last year.
Yeah, he was also captain and University of Michigan as well. So
Yep.
definitely has leadership in his blood. So that's one guy that he played all 82 last season as well. Even uh, so if he comes in healthy and ready to go, I think he can surpass that career season he did have between the Jets and the Rangers where he had 21 goals. So uh, that's pretty good. Yeah, that's my maths, right? 21 goals. He is capable, and I think he can definitely be that with, some talented wingers and playing in probably all situations too, because he'll probably play in the power play and the penalty kill, like you say, and definitely the penalty kill, and probably second unit power play. So yeah, we'll see on how he does in his second season in Detroit. Right, going from the second line center to possibly the third line center, Michael Rasmussen, and he had we talked about him quite a bit last season, quite a bit, and he had a relatively good season. He didn't match his career high from his 21-22, where he had 27, where he had 15 goals. But he only played 56 games last season, so 10 goals in 56. Go over a pace of 82. It's pretty good. I think he hits that a career high and then some. What do you expect from Rasmussen this season?
Another kind of key stat I want to point out here, and I know that we don't put a whole lot of stock into this stat, but sometimes it is nice to highlight because it does tell a little bit of a story.
Mm.
Um, Ras was a +2 this past season. That was his first time finishing as a plus player.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of speaks to his evolution as a player and just the fact that good things were happening more often than not when he was on the ice. I think that was evident, honestly, throughout the year. And one other thing I want to say about Ras too is that we kind of point at that back-to-back series with the Ottawa Senators as like the turning point for the Red Wings in terms of their season going downhill last year.
Mm.
Um, but I think that a turning point was honestly the game before that back-to-back series. It was a game against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I know this because I actually attended that game. Um, and Michael Rasmussen went down with a season-ending injury
Hmm.
in that game. And I tell you what, if you didn't believe that Ras was a big piece of their team before that injury, I think it was really quite clear how big of a piece he was afterwards because they simply weren't the same team.
Mhm.
Um, he's Ras is never going to be their highest scorer. We know that at this point. But he is going to play his butt off every single day, every single night. He's going to be a factor on the power play, on the penalty kill. He's going to find ways to be effective. I think that's one of the biggest reasons why the narrative on him has flipped a lot over the last 2 years, really, is because we not only have we accepted that he's not really going to live up to that ninth overall draft status, but he is going to be a player that you can root for. He works hard. He can play different roles. You mentioned him as a potential third line center. He also has looked really, really good on the wing. I would even argue that's probably where he is going to start the season is on the wing on one of the lines. I don't really know which one, but um, and he can play on the power play. He's got enough skill to like contribute in that kind of offensive role. He's also um, physical and competitive enough to be on the penalty kill. He had 119 hits last season. That speaks to his physicality. Um, and he's one of those players that just adds dimensions that you don't really see anywhere else in their lineup. He's big. We all know that. Um, and he's one of those players that when he plays mean, you just can't replicate it anywhere from anyone else on that team.
Mhm.
I talk about Klim Kostin being a good fit alongside Larkin and DeBrincat on the top line. I think Ras is the other really good fit there. Because not only does he make up for the size that DeBrincat doesn't have, he also can create space just through his hard work and physicality. I think he'd be a really good Thomas Holmstrom to Larkin and DeBrincat's Datsuk and Zetterberg, so to speak.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, what do I expect from Rasmussen this year? I honestly expect um just keep chugging along, keep doing what you're
Mhm.
doing because he's a fan favorite at this point. Everyone loves Moose. I'd love to see him push for 20 goals and 40, 45, maybe even 50 points. I'm not going to try to shoot too high on there because I do know he has his limitations and he's probably not going to play too high in the lineup. But I do think he's capable of hitting that 40-point plateau. And I would even say that he should aim for 50 with 40 being like um, an acceptable mark, basically.
Yeah, you know what line I want to see? I want to see a Rasmussen, Soderblom, and Costin line. I want to
Oh,
see
yes.
it.
Oh, yes. Good luck playing against that.
Holy size, physicality. Yeah, that's a tough gun. That'd be like the ideal playoff line. Like
Oh, yeah.
you wouldn't want to go against that line for sure.
That would put our grind line to shame.
We'll see if that line comes to be. I don't foresee it happening at the beginning of the season, but we may see it. We may see it down the line. Unfortunately, I don't see Soderblom being in the lineup on opening day, even though I said so in our lineup projections. But I believe that was that before DeBrincat was acquired? I can't remember when we did those.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it's he'll be in the lineup soon enough. It's just may not be this season unless injuries happen, which could also happen too. Okay, our off the rush before we end the show here, and this is a two-parter. We did mention Kane at the beginning, but Devin, I want you to give a percentage, a probability of him signing with the Red Wings. Do you see it happening? Or is it just something that seems like Kane wants it, but will it happen?
I'm gonna put it at 40%. I see the logic. I wouldn't be surprised if it's a legitimate thing. Kane and DeBrincat did have some really good chemistry in Chicago. Um, And for what it's worth, I think a Kane, Larkin, and DeBrincat line would very much replicate the Kane, Strome, and DeBrincat line that was in Chicago. But I don't think it's ultimately necessary. And we talked, it'd block a kid. I have to believe that they do intend on putting these kids in the lineup at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I also just think that outside of the DeBrincat connection, I don't think Detroit makes sense for Patrick Kane at all. Because the Red Wings want to be a playoff team this year, but that's it. Of course you hope to win the Stanley Cup, but if they make the playoffs, it's a good season.
Yeah.
I would imagine Patrick Kane would want to be on a team that is Stanley Cup or bust. I see him being more of a fit on Dallas or re-signing with the Rangers, right? If he really wants to play with DeBrincat that badly, then sure, send him to a league minimum salary. But if it's really anything more than that, no.
No, I like as much fun as it would be to see the DeBrincat Kane connection again, because they were dynamic in Chicago. But ultimately, I don't know if it really makes sense in the overall. And for Kane and I mean for the Red Wings of what they're doing, unless it's like a league, minimum 1-year deal just to see what happens, I guess, and then they could maybe flip him at the deadline for something. That could be maybe the ideal thing, but I don't know if Kane is going to go for that. We'll see how that all goes. All right, second part, and this is on Caufield versus DeBrincat. Who scores more goals? They could score on the same.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more or less in the same area. I will say DeBrincat. Again, this is a Red Wings show, so I feel semi-obligated to say that. But also, I like who will be feeding him the puck better than I like who will be feeding Caufield the puck. I also I feel like DeBrincat will find himself in more opportune situations to score. Because it's not just him on the Red Wings that can score. We talk about the Red Wings depth, right? He can find himself in favorable matchups to where he's going to light it up. Whereas Montreal, there's not that same level of depth. If you you can game plan around shutting down Caufield because it's him and maybe 2 other guys in Montreal, and then you're good. Whereas Detroit, you can shut down DeBrincat, shut down Raymond, but then David Perron's going to light you up. Michael Rasmussen can maybe light you up. Darren Larkin, you can go down the list. There's other guys in the lineup that can contribute. So I do think it'll be close. They're both kind of the same player. But I think DeBrincat's just in a slightly better situation.
Yeah, I think so too. I'm gonna put a number. I'm gonna say DeBrincat scores 40 and Caufield scores 38.
Yeah, I mean that's like the range.
That's just that's just a pull it out of the air thing. But I do think DeBrincat's going to hit 40. He's done it before. I think he's got enough skill around him that he can do it again. So we'll see, but it's going to be fun to find out throughout the season. All right, Devin, thanks for another grind line here. We'll hopefully get some other people on the panel for our Traverse City preview, which we'll talk about a bunch of the prospects going to be playing in that. And of course, once it's going, we'll be talking about a reaction to the games and how each of the prospects looked in those in that tournament. So that's going to be fun coming up. But until then, make sure to check out thehockeywriters.com for all our Red Wings coverage for season previews. We got a bunch of that coming out. Lots of preview posts and variety of topics. Got a lot of history stuff coming out as well. So definitely check that out. We also got the Hockey Writers Substack for the Red Wings as well. Make sure to sign up for that if you haven't already. If you have, thank you very much. And of course, give this video a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already, and keep those comments coming down below. We'll get our comment corner back next week because we are done with these line previews. So we need some content. So give us some questions so we can fill the show here until we get to our Traverse City preview, which will happen next week as well. But until next time, we'll see you on another episode of The Grind Line.